Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
All right. So thanks for tuning in to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Tonight, I'm hanging with my buddy, Brad Lail, and we're going to talk about the 33rd parallel. Before we get started, I want to remind you that Boundless Authenticity is now available on Spreaker. And actually, the best thing you can do to absolutely 100% boost our presence online is to download the Spreaker app and listen from there. But if not, we still love you anyway. So, Brad, what's going on?
What's up, dude? Thanks for having me on. How you been?
Yeah, I was very excited to have you on. A, because I like talking to you, and B, somebody knows something that I've never heard about before. So,
well,
what is the 33rd parallel?
Yeah, I didn't mean to step on you just now. Yeah, a lot of people don't, man. It's sort of actually, I believe that there have been a lot of people who've talked about it over the years, but I think that it keeps being deleted from the internet, to be honest with you. So I don't think I'm the first or anything. I think there's been people who've talked about it. It's just been buried in a way that, can't be found. I mean, even some of the shows I've been on, I can do a search for it in YouTube with the exact title and it won't come up. So that should tell you a little bit, about how close it is, how close it may be to the truth. So.
Yeah, well, I can already predict that might happen here. So I don't think this one's going to be on YouTube.
Yeah, man. It's whenever I talk about the 33rd parallel, it really spans more than just. So I just quickly, I guess, can explain what I think the 33rd parallel is. It's a line of, it's the 33 degrees north line of latitude above the equator. Okay, so that means everything that's on that line goes all the way around the globe, and everything that's on that line is like there's some high strangeness on there, but I call it a ley line, and I just use it as a reference point because a ley line is more or less an area. I don't think the Earth has exact numbers and boundaries, right? I think it's just a region. So whenever I say the 33rd parallel, I had some guy email me and he's like, "You're wrong about all this," and I'm like, I try to explain it all the time that it's an area of Earth where harmonic energies are coming from the Earth, okay, like telluric currents and electromagnetic energies coming from the Earth, and he was right. Like some of these things, like for example, the Georgia Guidestones, it's like on the 34.0 parallel, but that's so close to the 33rd parallel that you have to kind of, rope that in as well. I mean, because we are the ones who made the maps and the numbering and all that stuff. We come up with that system, but the natural ley line of that, spans the globe is something that's been there for ever since the beginning of Earth, So to me, the 33rd parallel is a ley line, harmonic energy that crosses the whole globe. Okay. And again, that's the 33 degrees parallel north of the equator. So.
Okay. So my question is, how did you even stumble onto this?
It's a good question, man. So I grew up on the 33rd parallel, but I didn't realize that I lived and I grew up on the 33rd parallel. And I'd heard stories, I grew up in the National Forest in South Carolina, and I'd heard stories about different little, every area has its own little local legends about stuff, right? Every town has its own little local legends all around the world. So ours was no different, but I found out that we lived on the 33rd parallel not too long ago, actually, because I started getting into, conspiracy always leads to spirituality. And I started down the road of conspiracy about 2012, ended up in the paranormal world, a little bit later. And then lately I've been going into the spirituality aspect of what's really going on in the world. So as I got into the paranormal side of things, I started I was kind of obsessing a little bit, not really obsessing, but I was like consuming everything I could, books and movies and documentaries about everything that was related to anything paranormal. And I started coming across things like, like documentaries about, there's a place called Bishopville, South Carolina. And I was like, oh, that's, right down the road from where I live now and not far from where I grew up. And I looked it up and it was like, oh, that's on the 30, I just happened to, do a Google map search and I saw that it was like on the 33rd parallel. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it wasn't until a little bit later that I stumbled across a website called the National UFO Reporting Center.org. And it's a website that people, the government, the FAA, if people call the FAA and they report weird things in the sky, the FAA will tell them to go to the National UFO Reporting Center and report it there. But the National UFO Reporting Center is not a national organization. It's just some guy who has a website and people just post all their stories there. So I found a story online. Give me 1 second. I got to clear my throat. Excuse me. But I found a story online. It was a UFO in my hometown. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I clicked on it and it happened to be a YouTube link. And when I saw the video, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder where that's at. So I call up my dad, and my dad's kind of he used to be in the paranormal stuff too before he died. And but not as heavily as, I am now. And I said, I saw this video. He goes, oh yeah, that's the fella that's up at the front of our dirt road. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, he's been filming them for a long time. He moved away not too long ago though, but yeah, he was in the paper talking about those. And it turned out the video that he was filming, the videos, I mean, he had many videos over the course of many years that he was filming was literally right over my parents' house, the house there, the same land that I grew up on. And I was like, what? And so I asked my dad about it and he's like, yeah, I see these kind of things all the time. And as I continued down this paranormal path, I would ask people locally, like, hey, have you ever heard anything or seen anything? And they would go, yeah, I've seen this. And there's always whispers. It was always like, they would come up to me and go, hey man, I got a story to tell you. I heard you into this kind of stuff, but I don't want to tell nobody about this. And so eventually I kind of got a collection of stories just from our local area. But, again, I kept studying the paranormal stuff and I started seeing like, oh, Roswell, New Mexico is on the 33rd degree, the 33rd parallel. And Phoenix Lights is on the 33rd parallel. And Kennedy assassination was on the 33rd parallel. And the Battle of Los Angeles, the famous picture of the UFO that's over the beach in LA. It's like everything I saw was like, 33rd parallel. And I was like, well, that's crazy. And then again, I discovered that, oh, I grew up on the 33rd parallel. I had no idea. So then it got me really curious because I was like, okay, so I've heard many stories from my area. So there has to be more stories from other places. And as I started studying stuff, I mean, it became pretty evident that there's something pretty huge going on in this area, in this region of Earth. And so I guess you could say I kind of became obsessed with it because I started like looking up every, thing that I could find that was related to anything that has to do with like any kind of paranormal sightings. Like I mentioned, the Bishopville, there's this Bishopville, South Carolina, there's this thing called the Lizard Man. So I kept as I kept digging, I kept finding stuff. And I'm sure you could probably do this with any region of Earth, really. You could probably look up stuff and find, different types of paranormal type of things that happen in different regions. There's another parallel that crosses Massachusetts. I think it's the 42nd parallel. That's pretty strange as well. But this one's pretty big, the one that I'm talking about, because you got, I started discovering like a lot of the prisons, what do you call it? The death row prisons are on the 33rd parallel. And then I started discovering like, a lot of major celebrities were born on these. And I'm not just talking about like, celebrities that are like, you kind of know them. I'm talking about people like Elvis and Johnny Cash and Marilyn Monroe and Oprah and Kanye West and people who are just like, seem like they're bigger stars than normal people, right? They're they have this charisma about them that's a little bit bigger than normal. Even Jesus was born on the 33rd parallel, right? It's like as I kept going down the line, studying everything, it became more evident. Like there's observatories on the 33rd parallel, tons of them. So like, it didn't stop. It never stops. Matter of fact, I picked up a camera last week, me and my little brother, and we're filming a 33rd parallel documentary. And we got into Georgia. I mean, we're in South Carolina now, but we got into Georgia and we didn't get but a few, 50 miles in, and we stopped at this place. And then we kept asking locals about different areas. And man, we ended up everywhere, or just in one little area on the 33rd parallel. And we spent 2 days in Georgia, and we were just expecting to make a few stops in Georgia and, be on our way to Alabama and Texas and other places, Louisiana. But man, there's so much stuff in the woods that we don't see, that we don't even know about. There's so many ancient structures. There's effigies that are, huge effigies that can only be seen from the sky. There are, mounds and pyramids, what I call pyramids, on the 33rd parallel. There are just tons of different things that people don't even know about. So even the stuff I've been able to just Google map and study just from, historical events and things like that is something, but there's a much greater, there's a much bigger story there than what's being told, because a lot of these major structures, like I said, from Poverty Point, Louisiana, to Moundville in Alabama, to the Greenville, Mississippi mounds, the Winterville mounds in Greenville, Mississippi, to, you name it, all these major ancient stone structures, even right next to where I live now. As close as 20 miles away, that I'd never heard of before. So I didn't mean to keep going on and on, but it's a story that's still being unraveled, even as I'm trying to put the pieces together. So it's a never ending story. And it even ties into a world grid that I believe aliens use to draw motive power to go all over, to just travel the world, right? So, and it ties into atomic bombs and things like that. So it's a pretty wild story, man, but we can take it any direction you want to take it in.
Yeah, this is so fascinating. I have no idea which question to ask you next, to be honest. Like, I'm wondering if this is some way that the powers that shouldn't be, maybe they have set it up so that they can harvest energy from people. Or, like you said, celebrities that seem to be extraordinary are born on the 33rd parallel. But we also know that many of these celebrities are given to normal families in a very strange ritualistic way. And then they're just raised like normal until they reach a certain age. And then, they break out and they become superstars because people give them the right boost here or there. And I wonder if, all of that's a part of the plan for these people, where they just become extremely gifted, and it's because of the energy that's coming in. Like a person, like you mentioned, it's like a harmonic type of energy. And it's interesting to me because I was born shortly after the harmonic convergence. And what I found is that people who were born around that time period tend to be a little bit different, like psychically, especially to other people,
Yeah, it's like like Elvis was born with these psychic abilities. I had a guy on my show named Miguel Connor who wrote a book about I think it's called America's Magician. And he wrote a book about Elvis and how he had all these extra abilities that, people never just kind of look past, but he could make it rain and he could do all these amazing things. And he also had a little brother that he lost, or a twin brother that he lost at birth, that he talked regularly about being able to communicate with on the other side. And he even had this, I've read this story before online, where he had this encounter one time whenever he was little with this alien or entity or whatever, and it showed him a vision of himself singing in white on a stage in front of tons of a large audience, So it almost makes you feel like there's people who are born on this line who have extra star power, and they usually have handlers. What I've started to notice as well, they usually have somebody that's kind of, guiding them. Like, Kanye had this guy. I don't know if you remember this, but he was like a trainer. And if you follow any of that, I briefly did, but Kanye West had somebody that was like threatening to put him in a mental hospital and all that stuff whenever he kind of went off the reservation, whenever he kind of took a path off different than what the powers that be wanted him to. He was quickly he was checked by this guy, and Kanye sent out screenshots of the conversation that this guy was saying to him, just to show him what he's dealing, just to show the world what he's dealing with. So, and Elvis had, the Colonel, he had the Colonel that was always there kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes, and, kind of his like mentor, I guess you could say, his manager, his road manager, he kind of did everything for him. So, but these people usually have handlers. And so that's an interesting thing too. Like like you said, were they born and then handed to families and then kind of used in a way that can manipulate the masses in whatever way they want. Right. And I think that it's easy to recognize that kind of star power. I think a lot of celebrities have that. And if they don't toe the line, I think that they get off pretty quickly, because they have this way about them that can affect they can penetrate the collective consciousness bubble, right? They can kind of push beyond those boundaries. I mean, you think about the way people acted with Elvis whenever he was on stage, the way they would faint and cry. I mean, his energy was he had so much charisma about him that he could manipulate the masses with whatever he wanted to say. So I think that's an interesting avenue to go down if anybody ever wants to, keep going down that road. It's not something that I've looked into a lot, but it's something that I've definitely noticed, and it's kind of hard not to notice because it's world-renowned figures. It's not just, like I said, a B-list or C-list celebrity. It's usually, even sports, Jesse Owens and Hank Aaron. It's even big athletes that come from this line too. Michael Jackson, I think, came from that line that's pretty close to on the 42nd parallel, which is the Massachusetts line that I was talking about. So it's interesting, man. That's just an interesting thread to tug at. Even got guys like Hulk Hogan and I could list them all. Hank Williams Sr. and Jr. The list goes on and on. Even from my little hometown of about 1,200 people, we've had, I can't even 7 NFL players and pro basketball players, and we've had big name celebrities that are currently in the media. There's a popular morning DJ that's from our area. There's a super popular mega church preacher that's from our area. And it's like it's hard to ignore that, man. I have a town of 1,200 people that there's big name people coming out of this little tiny area. But conversely, there's also a ton of abnormal amount of deaths coming out of the area too. So it's something about the energies of the area where I live that can either cause you to succeed on a level that's unprecedented, or cause you to die off. I mean, I've had 4 best friends that have died in crazy accidents, and that just kind of scratches the surface. I mean, I've had tons of ex-girlfriends die in weird ways, like car accidents and things like that. A lot of people from the area in general have just fallen off of roofs at work, got electrocuted at work, or just weird accidents that you don't typically see. So
right.
there's
something about this energy that amplifies either side. of the spectrum of things. Like it probably opens up these people to, I mean, what it sounds like to me is like I think that everybody kind of has exit points where you have like a list of different things that you're supposed to do on the planet, a list of experiences, but there's also these exit points. And if you go down a dark path and you decide that you want to take an exit point off the planet, you want to commit suicide, or, you know, a certain series of events occurs and you choose the wrong one and you might end up in a bathtub getting electrocuted by accident or something, you know. Like, I believe that there's such a phenomenon that exists, and it's kind of what that sounds like, you know. Like, I used to live with a guy that his uncle was Conway Twitty, and he told me that Conway was always just so much more spiritually and like psychically and musically gifted than other people that ever existed, even though the entire family was pretty much into music and stuff like that, right? Like everybody sang or played an instrument and stuff like that. And then like Conway just died in a random, like he had like a stomach ache and he went to the bathroom and he died, you know? And it's kind of weird how, you know, there's these people, they're extraordinarily gifted in one way and then they die in freak accidents and stuff. So, and all that stuff kind of makes me think, it makes me question.
Conway Twitty was born in 1933 on the 33rd parallel, by the way, and his name was not Conway Twitty. It was something along the lines of like Harold Jenkins or something like that. But his name, Conway Twitty, was a cross between somewhere in Arkansas and somewhere in Texas. It was two towns that's where he got his name from, and both were, you know, right on that line of the 33rd parallel. So it doesn't surprise me, right? Yeah. I mean, I know I know that there are people out there, you know, there's, you know, what is it called? Gematria guys who are like, you know, these are all connected, and they're probably right. I don't look that far into the gematria of things, but there is an interesting connection to the number 33. I mean, you can't ignore it. It's so many things happen that you just can't ignore. As well as the
number 42, right? In gematria, it's an interesting number as well.
Yeah.
So
again, gematria is not something that, you know, like I have this client out of Arkansas, like for what I do. And I go up there regularly to go around and like I take photos and stuff like that. I build websites. So I go around the state, and I happened to come upon this place one time, and it was like a town of 200, and it was Johnny Cash's hometown. I was like, that's crazy. It was like, this had a big sign that said the home of Johnny Cash. The next town over was the home of Bear Bryant. And I'm like, that's crazy, because it was another small town. Like, what are the chances that two American icons, like Bear Bryant is the winningest coach in college football history, right? He's an icon. So like, what are the chances that those two things happen? And then again, you start noticing these things as I drove down the 33rd parallel, because basically it starts at where I live now, and you can just pretty much drive down the interstate right along the line, right along the 33rd parallel, and you'll see like giant crosses that look exactly the same all the way down the 33rd parallel. And it's like every time I see one, I'm like, oh, I must be on the 33rd. But so my point is like when you travel these places, man, it's like you start to make these connections. And that kind of goes back to what you were asking me at the beginning of the show, was just like, you know, how did you notice that? And it's like, I noticed patterns for some reason. I'm pretty good at picking up patterns. And I'm like, you know, when you see a one cross or two crosses that look the same, you're like, oh, okay, maybe that's just a coincidence. But when you see, you know, dozens of them on a straight line across many states that look exactly the same, it's like, what are the chances of that, you know? So, and they're always on the 33rd parallel. And I'm sure there are some in other places, but it just so happens to be that they're always on the 33rd parallel that I've seen, you know? So, you know, you just start picking up on things, man, and you start noticing things like the Conway Twitty thing. That's another one. It's like you could probably pick up or start, just do a Google search on just choose a random celebrity and where they're from, where they were born at. And it's probably somewhere like Mississippi or Arkansas or, you know, right. Atlanta, Georgia is another big one. It's like, it's crazy, man. Atlanta's on the 33rd. So
that's why I brought him up, because I knew he was all kinds of weird, but it was funny when you said, okay, yeah, he was born on the 33rd parallel, you know?
in 1933. Nope.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, man. There's a lot of symbolism there too. There's a lot of, the 33rd president was Harry Truman, but the 32nd president was FDR. FDR, had 3 terms or whatever it was. So he was the only president to ever have 3 terms. So he was the 32nd president, and then he had an extra 4 years, right? So technically he was the 33rd president, and he was a 33-degree Freemason. Matter of fact, he was buried in Georgia on the 33rd parallel. He established the Bank Act, or what is it? Basically signed into law the Federal Reserve, to make the Federal Reserve the standard, I guess, without gold. And so and even if you look on the back of the $1 bill, it says in Latin, I don't know how to say it in Latin, but I'll just say the translation, which means a new order for the ages. It's right under the pyramid. And so that was put in place whenever he was the president. But when Truman was the president, when he was the 33rd president, he signed the National Defense Act of 1947, which created the CIA, the FBI, the Air Force, the DNI. Oh, I don't know. You there?
Yeah, we had a disruption in the internet.
Oh, sorry, man. I'll just continue on if you want.
Continue on.
So the National Defense Act, or I can't remember what it's called exactly, was signed in 1947 on July 26, 1947. Just a few weeks after Roswell, the Roswell incident happened, which again happened on the 33rd parallel. And he signed it into law on what was the first Air Force One, which was called the Sacred Cow, which I think is interesting, right? It's like there's this symbology of things. There's always sacred something. There's sacred cows. There's always some sort of a ritualistic aspect to everything they do. And
remember, like for the Freemasons and stuff, it was before it was the bull, it was the cow. Like everything was extremely sacred about the cow, and they worshipped those things. So that is very interesting symbolism. Yeah.
But he signed it in 3 weeks after Roswell. Roswell happened July 8th, 1947. And he signed it while in air, a few weeks later. And I think in my opinion, it was something that it was like an agreement. It was part of this. I think they discovered that there was extraterrestrials or ultra terrestrials or whatever. And they had to come up with a plan on how they would approach things. Cause I think they got a lot of, technology and information and scientific discovery and medicine and stuff from the crashes at Roswell. And I think that they, excuse me. Sorry, I keep cutting in and out. I'm coughing. I'm trying not to cough into the mic for you guys. But I think that what happened was they got all this technology and everything, and they decided we need to get more information from these things, these entities or whatever. And so a couple of weeks later, they signed passed all these Department of, Director of National Intelligence and National Security Council and all this stuff. And I think what they did when they did that was they signed into agreement some kind of a quid pro quo to these entities, and they give them blood sacrifice, and the entities give us, which the entities I think are the fallen angels, and these entities give us in return, information in the form of technology, medicine, scientific discovery. So I think there's a quid pro quo there. And again, Roswell happened on the 33rd parallel. Roswell is on the 33rd parallel. And there's another interesting tie-in to that area. So the Roswell was the home of the 509th Bomb Group. And the 509th Bomb Group was training. They were the ones who were dropping. They were training out of White Sands Proving Grounds, which is on the 33rd parallel, not far away in New Mexico. I mean, in the same state in New Mexico. So the 509th was actually the ones who dropped the first atomic bomb, the test bomb, the Trinity test, in the White Sands Proving Grounds, and they were also the bomb group that dropped the bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which again is on the 33rd parallel. And so there's an very interesting tie-in to all of that. And there's a guy named Bruce Cathy who wrote a book called Harmonic 33. He actually wrote a whole bunch of books about harmonics. And what he did was he was a pilot from New Zealand, and this was like in the 50s, and he started seeing these USOs, which are underwater submerged objects or whatever. It's the UFO version. I mean, it's the underwater version of UFOs. And he saw those, and he started seeing strange things in the sky. And he became really curious about UFOs. And so he just started basically coming up with a math system to figure out where these things were traveling. And he actually created this world grid, this map that kind of mapped out this whole transportation line for entities, or these UFOs or UAPs or whatever you want to call them. And what he determined was, he noticed that, he didn't make the connection that I'm making about the atomic bomb droppings and stuff like that. He made the connection. He noticed that he was the one that pointed it out, that he could pinpoint exactly when the next atomic bomb was going to drop. Because what he did, he created a math system that included the harmonics of Earth and the harmonics of the sun. And he determined that when those harmonics would line up at a certain, usually in July or August, when they would line up with each other, that's whenever you'd have to drop a bomb to get the mass effect of an atomic bomb. And what he noticed was, like, these huge meteor craters, like the one in Arizona, that's on the 33rd parallel. It's a perfect circle if you're looking at it from the sky. And he thought, that's strange, because how can something coming from outer space, and we're traveling 1,000 miles per hour, et cetera, how can it come in and make a perfect circle down? How come it's not at an angle? So he determined that, or he thinks that, that a cataclysm caused this world grid system that these UFOs were using to draw motive power from. He thinks that there was a cataclysm that caused it, and then it disrupted all these lines, and they blew up like transformers all around the world. And he thinks that these entities are currently coming back to Earth to repair all this stuff. That's why you see them hovering in different areas and stuff like that. But I actually think that our government was putting these lines up intentionally at some point with these atomic bombs, and they discovered like that when you hit these points, these heavier than normal telluric current areas, or these harmonics, when you hit it, it has more of a boom, more of a mass effect. There's been almost exclusively bombs have been dropped and tested on the 33rd parallel, including one that's near my house where I live now, which is about 5 miles away in Mars Bluff, South Carolina. So there's all these accidental bomb droppings and stuff that happen on the 33rd parallel, as well as tests, as well as real life bombs that happen, over in Japan. So there's something to be said about the fact that the 509th Atomic Bomb Group is stationed out of the 33rd parallel right there in Roswell, New Mexico, and every bomb they dropped was on the 33rd parallel. So there's something to be said about the energies of Earth coming from that area for sure. And Bruce Cathy he created a whole new math system that connected the dots to all this, which was an incredible feat, because he did it over the course of 50 years. And he started discovering, like, there's a whole math system that we should be using. And he wrote in his books that he brought it up to, like, our government officials and also government officials in New Zealand. And he said he had people from the CIA and FBI contact him and say, yeah, we already know about this new math system. Don't tell anybody about it. But, he wrote a book about it, and he said he had people, Men in Black type people, following him his whole life. And he was just a normal guy. I mean, he was just, if you ever look up pictures of this guy, he just looks like a normal older man, with glasses and suspenders. There's no kookiness about him. He just came up with a new math system. And what he did was he used the harmonics of Earth. He used nautical miles. He added the nautical miles in versus, the miles that we use, in the United States. He added in the fact that there's 27 hours in a day, not 24 hours, because that aligns up with our biological clocks. And so he used all this math, and it was perfect. He could figure out where everything was, where the next thing was going to happen, the bomb drops, where the next UFO sightings would happen. He figured it all out, and he was really a mathematical genius. And then that's when he started getting approached by people trying to figure out like what's going on. Like, how do you know all this? How do you know when the next thing is going to happen? And he told him, hey, I just kind of figured out this math stuff. I figured out I would work out the equations, and I figured it out. Eventually I determined where he could point out where things were happening. Like, he could find places where they were going to put in these strange antennas would pop up all over the world. There was this antenna called the Eltonin antenna. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's off the coast of Russia. And it's an antenna that's underneath the ocean, like something like 3,600 feet underneath the ocean. And this was discovered in the late 1800s by a submarine doing sonar, I believe. And they did a sonar and had a picture of it. Basically, they took a picture of it from the sonar, and it looked like a modern antenna that was just sticking up out of the water. But Bruce Cathy could find other ones just like it based on like his math, his world grid system that he had created or that he had discovered. So it's a very interesting topic, man. It's a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. But again, it all ties back to the 33rd parallel. So.
Yeah, the most fascinating part about it for me is all of the energetic phenomenon, and especially the UFO stuff. Because, I mean, I've mentioned this to you already, and you were probably like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? When I said, like, I don't think that the way that people are being taught to think about UFOs, especially within the spiritual community, that they're coming back or stuff like that. Like, you can't come back if you've been here the whole time. You get what I'm saying? Like, I've seen USOs. I live on the beach, and I live on the west coast of Barbados, and I've seen a craft dive straight into the water. I've seen it hover and go across, and it wasn't something that was overtly visible. In other words, it appeared translucent in the sky. It wasn't like a solid craft or anything like that, but it had a particular aura to it. Not like it was particularly lit up all the way, but you could see it, and it went straight down at a really abrupt angle into the water, and there was no splash, nothing. And I'm thinking that the size, to my perception, that it was from the shoreline, and this is at nighttime, it had to be pretty big, but it also had to be a pretty far distance away. And so the next closest island to me is St. Vincent. And I was thinking to myself, okay, well, what the heck is happening right there? So it'd be interesting to kind of go and Google the coordinates now and look at that and see like what would be happening in between there, that it would be going down in the water like that, right? And I just think that there's a lot of beings that live inside of the earth. I think that we're sitting around waiting for these extraterrestrials to return when they've probably been hovering around the entire time and just have no interest in the things that we would like them to be interested in, if that makes sense to you. Like, they've got their own stuff that they want to do, and coming to, say, take me to your leader is something they've already done. And that's the last thing that you're ever going to see, with all the programming conditioning out there around these beings,
Yeah. I try not to use the word extraterrestrial. When I'm talking to people who speak the same language as me, I'll say ultra terrestrials, because ultra terrestrials is the real word. And that's something that there's man, if I could find it right now, I'd pull it up for you and read it. But I'll give you there was an FBI file that I opened one day and I read it. And if you read it, it'll tell you exactly what an ultra terrestrial is, what these things are. And it says that basically they vibrate into our reality into our dense reality from a different place that's connected to our place, but within our place somehow. The people who wrote this don't really understand it. They just know that they vibrate into our reality. Again, this about vibrations, frequency, energy, vibrations, like Tesla was talking about. And that's what they do, man. They vibrate in and out of our reality like it's nothing. Like, they can change their frequency at any point to come into our reality. That's why when you see them flying into volcanoes and stuff like that, It's like they can just shift it's like they have some kind of control or something that just shifts their matter into a different reality. Or they either, pull it up high to go into a volcano or pull it down low to go into the ocean or whatever. But they can just, it's just like a smoke screen. It's like a duck blind, for them. But they can see.
That's precisely what it is. Yeah.
What's that?
And that's precisely what I've seen as well. I said that's precisely what it is. It's like a smoke screen. Like they just disappear in nothing,
Yeah, and I have a theory on that.
Traveling
I have a theory on that, dude. It's like I talk about it ad nauseum really on my show because it really connects a lot of things for me. And it's these things are the Nephilim. They're the fallen angels. These are the ones that they control things from this outside realm that we can't see. This the unseen world. It's the upside down, basically, from Stranger Things is what it is. It's a world that's parallel to ours that exists outside of the visible.
No idea what that reference is.
It's a reference to the show Stranger Things. But basically,
I have no idea. When you say that, I have no idea because I've never seen it. I don't watch TV.
Okay. Well,
maybe somebody else listening might know what you're talking about. I'm lost.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I was an extra on the show. So it's a really popular show on Netflix and they talk a lot about this kind of stuff. And I'm not drawing comparisons to that really. I'm just using that as a visual for people to understand what I'm talking about. If you have a chance, if anybody has a chance at home, pull up the electromagnetic spectrum and look at the visible light. That's what we are. That's where we are. That's what we're in. To the left of the visible spectrum is the radio waves, the microwaves, and the infrared. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you got ultraviolet rays, gamma rays, and X-rays. Okay. So what that means is like the things on the right, the ultraviolet rays, et cetera, is vibrating at a high frequency. They radiate at a very high, fast frequency. Okay. That's why they radiate so much heat. That's why when these things come into our reality, they leave a radioactive footprint. On the opposite side of that is the infrared area, right? The radio waves. It's very slow vibrating, which means it's very cold because vibrations is what creates heat. Okay. And so if it's a slow vibration, that means there's almost no heat. It means it's cold. That means that these dark, shadowy things that live there are freezing. They're disembodied spirits that live in this world. On the opposite side this is where the fallen angels reside. And it's too hot. That's where you get the idea that hell is very hot. But it's actually both. Hell is both hot and cold because it's things that exist outside of we live in God's light. We live in the perfect harmony of God's light. We live in a perfect frequency pattern that everybody can resonate to, right? Everybody, anything you see in this world is made up of the colors of the spectrum that you see. Now, I try to explain to people, because some people will ask, okay, well, where's this light being projected from? And I think it's being projected from the sun. And it's coming through the ionosphere, acts as a prism, just like a prism. You see a little diamond or the little pyramid prisms, and that's how you refract light. You shine a light through it, through a slit, and it refracts the colors of the rainbow and it spreads them out, right? So that's what's happening here. God's light is shining through the ionosphere, which is actually a prism. And the ionosphere is made up of plasma. It's a plasma field, right? And when it shines into this reality, it disperses this light throughout this plasma bubble that we live in. So that's why it's always hard for people to determine if we're living in some kind of globe earth or flat earth or whatever. I just think it's a projection in a plasma, some sort of a plasma ball that we're in. Everything that the ether that we're in, that we're swimming in, is plasma. Everything's made up of plasma. Electricity flows through plasma. Everything is made up of plasma. And there's a whole nother aspect of that I could talk about too, if you want. But it's like, The plasma stuff
Right.
is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, the plasma thing is, we'll be talking for another 3 hours if we start to
Yeah, I
talk
know.
about that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
everything you're saying is lining up with my own. Like, I was trying to tell you some of my spiritual experiences the other night, and where I was talking about you going to God's light, right?
Right.
And in order to get to God's light, it's not something that you simply imagine. It's something that you experience, and you feel it in your aura. You feel it with your aura. It's above the skin. It's not something that you feel inside your body or you perceive inside your mind just by itself. And you have to pass through that rainbow spectrum as you're going through it. And so it's almost like you're leaving out the top of your head and you're projecting yourself outwards into this space, right? And when you go out into this space, that's when you can get answers for anything, any question that you want to know. And you may not get it immediately. It may come to you in your dreams, or it may come to you during just a random moment of silence or something during the day when you're not really thinking actively. So what you're saying makes sense to me, but also like the extraterrestrial thing, a lot of the times when I've meditated and I've had experiences of entities, they enter through your perception, and it's like when you strike a tuning fork. They come and they go, and it's like when you strike a tuning fork and it begins to disappear, it begins to dissolve in front of your eyes. Is exactly what it's like to me. So you've kind of like described a lot of things that make sense to me because of the experiences that I've had, you know?
Yeah, it lines up, man. It really does. And actually, if you look at a lot of these telescopes that are on the 33rd parallel, you know, they have prisms inside of them. They're reverse prisms. Okay. And they have to be cooled down to minus 200 degrees because they have to be cryogenically cold enough to be able to see into the unseen world that I'm talking about. So when you see images from James Webb Telescope and all this stuff, that's what you're seeing. I don't think you're seeing space, you know, far away space like they think you're showing. I think what they're seeing is they're looking into that realm that I was just talking about, the infrared realm, where it's basically where when we communicate, all of those communications go because radio waves go through there, right? So everything goes through there first and then comes back into our reality. And that's what they're studying. That's the stuff they're studying because, and again, they're using a reverse prism to look into space, into that space around it that's outside of God's light. That's what they're looking to. That's the space. And that's where those things reside. And so when they come in, you know, they want to come into God's light because it's perfect. It's a perfect harmony. It's a perfect balance of everything. It's warm. You know, you can have experiences on earth, you know, whatever kind of experiences you want, and they can't have any of that, but they want it bad. And that's the thing is like, that's why they'll do anything to lower our fear. I mean, to lower our vibrations to a level of fear, because fear vibrates at 4 hertz. Huh?
Precisely.
Yeah. Fear vibrates at a low vibration. Love vibrates at 528 hertz. Okay. Much faster. When you're vibrating in the vibrations of love, it actually, nothing can attach itself onto you. Nothing. But when you're in fear, when you're constantly afraid of losing your job, or, you know, afraid of your neighbor, or afraid of the next nuclear war, or afraid of whatever, they keep you in a state of fear. And these entities can attach themselves onto you easier because you're at such a low vibration. That's why when you see people who are using drugs in, like, what is that area in Philadelphia, the Kensington area or whatever it's called, it's like they look like zombies because they're possessed, man. These things, you know, attach themselves onto people, and they do that in the form of depression as well. I mean, that takes it, you know, into your path, obviously. But I think that's what's happening. I think that, you know, once people get in a state of fear in some sort of way, they can't get out of it because the things that are talking to them are demons. They're like the things that are telling them that you're not good enough, or, you're not pretty enough, or whatever it is. The things that make people depressed, that, you know, you're not a good enough mom or a good enough dad. that's the demons talking to him. That's the image of the demon the devil on your shoulder, talking to you. And so, but the thing is you have to tell those things to get out. You have to, tell them that your body belongs to Christ. And to me, Christ is Christ consciousness. That's a vibration of love that you have to get to. And so it's all about vibrations, man. These things can hijack our vibrations. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, these Nephilim are, they're taking people, they're, taking them, and they're making hybrid, they're trying to make hybrid Nephilim creatures with these people. And then because they're trying to populate, they're trying to bring those Nephilim into this reality. And they think that can work, but it can't. And that's what the quid pro quo is with what I was telling you about. I think that there are people who serve the dark ones, right? They worship the fallen angels. The fallen angels fell to Mount Hermon, which is on the 33rd parallel. So it's interesting. And there's a NATO base at the top of Mount Hermon right now. So it's very interesting. So there just happens to be a NATO base, right, where the fallen angels have allegedly fell to earth. And it's actually where Jesus had his transfiguration as well, was on top of Mount Hermon. So it's a lot of interesting tie-ins to all of this stuff, man.
Yeah, everybody is, and this is the main problem, everybody's brainwashed by something. Ideas can both be paralyzing and they can be inspiring. And the way that the brain is wired, we gravitate towards brain candy. So anything that sounds good, remember when I was teaching you about the nucleus accumbens role in learning, it becomes a motivating force. So when we have conspiracy theorists that go off on tangents about things that don't even really matter, and all they're doing is regurgitating more stuff that they've heard before, that's how they get us, because it's perpetuating fear. When in reality, truth is also just as high of a vibration as love or anything else like that. Because when you sit in your truth and you sit in the understanding of spiritual realities, it puts you in a different place. It's almost like you could be walking on the same road as somebody that is living in fear, and they'll see things that you don't see, and you'll see things that they don't see. And what they see is of a lower nature, And I think that that's the biggest problem. It's the hijacking of consciousness, because essentially that's what it's all about. Energy harvesting through one way or another. And that's the number one reason why in my stuff I talk about the limbic system, because that's the fear center, right? And they want to get you from children. And so the prefrontal cortex isn't developed. You're thinking with your amygdala up until you're 21, 22 years old, sometimes even longer than that, depending on your development, right? So I think that that's what a lot of this stuff is all about. It's about, how do I keep these people in this dense, lower frequency that they'll never, ever really know what they're all about, right?
Yeah, I think that when you vibrate at a higher level, you're a different version of yourself. I really think that. I think there's different levels, different versions of yourself, like a page of a book. I've heard that analogy used before. Like if you're opening a book, you might be on page 35 and somebody's on page 2. And that's kind of what it's like when you see somebody who's on drugs. It's like you can't relate to that person. And it's the same as somebody who has a lot of money. That person, you can't relate to that person, right? It's like, but it's a different version of yourself. And I think that there's been some things that happened in my life, man, that I've called up friends and they don't remember who I am. It's almost like my own personal Mandela effects, right? It's like, it blows my mind because some of these people, because we're different versions of ourselves, literally, right? Like I can have a conversation.
It's almost like we've evolved from, it's almost in our evolution, we've deleted versions of ourselves that interacted with these people on different timelines, and it no longer exists. And they're like, what? I've had people pass me in public that have no idea who I am. And we were close when we were growing up.
Yeah, it happened to 2 guys that I was stationed with. And both guys, I know would remember me no matter what, because I'd go on vacations with these guys. I went to baseball games with these guys. We were even in the newspaper at the same time. And interestingly enough, that newspaper article that I was just telling. We were in the front page together, me and him. That picture's hanging on my wall and he's not in it. So that's a very interesting, like, you know, how can that be? Because I know for a fact he was there with me. I know for a fact he was standing right beside me in the photo. You could see both of us. And that's why I saved the paper. But in this version, it doesn't exist. In this version of me, my friendship with these people didn't exist. I called this one guy and I said, yeah, I was stationed with you for like 3 years. We traveled together. We stayed in the same hotel room together. Like how can you not remember me? He's like, I'm sorry, friend. I've met a lot of people in 20 years. I just don't remember you. And it's just odd to me, man. So again, I think we're different versions of ourselves. Even when I have a conversation with my mom, she'd be like, you remember this? And I go, no. But I'll say something. I'm like, do you remember this? And she goes, no. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, like it definitely happened. I definitely remember that happened. But we'll sit there and go back and forth and argue all the time about that. And I'm just like, listen, I think that we're different people now or something. I don't know how to explain that. So it's interesting. It's an interesting observation. But I think that we all have this, not all, there's a few of us that I think that have been chosen since birth to come in and be light workers in some way, you know, to kind of wake people up in a way that, you know, I just had a guy on my podcast last night and we talked about something similar. It's like we're star seeds, but I don't like to say that, but that's kind of how I feel sometimes. I just like to call myself a light worker sometimes because I have all these things that have happened to me in my life where it feels like my whole life I've been prepared for doing what I'm doing now, to talk about this kind of stuff or to, you know, or to meet guys like you who are the same way. We're put here for a reason, because I think there's going to be some sort of a major event that happens where we have to guide everybody else. There's going to be some sort of major consciousness shift to where we have to be the ones that kind of, you know, help people along that path. Because when people wake up when everybody wakes up at the same time, because the veil is currently thinning, you know, there will be this mass confusion and there will be a lot of bad things happening, right? It just feels like, you know, this stuff, we're designed to be here at this point in time to talk about this stuff. It's not a coincidence that you and I communicate and you happen to reach out to me and I ask you why. And it's kind of in that same realm. It's like, you just don't understand that you're being used as a vessel for God's will. And, you know, I didn't ask for any of this.
You asked me why. Yeah, I asked you why, and I gave you like the longest, most convoluted answer anybody could ever give you. But it's definitely like written in the stars, as they say, and you know how I feel about the starseed thing. That's just another term that's kind of been handed to us, but it doesn't really quite grasp the fullness of the situation. Like, there's no way that we could use English language to describe exactly what's going on here. And I think that in terms of what you're saying, I think we're probably here to witness a long series of microaggressions. And there's a particular group of people out there who are also going to, I don't want to use the word wake up. They're going to come online. They're going to tune in to their spirit and they're going to gravitate towards the things that we're saying. And it's going to help them either understand or they're going to choose not to go any further, if you get what I'm saying. Like, everybody's subject to their own choice and what they want to do. And I definitely see evidence of that happening, you know?
Yeah, I definitely understand it, man. I don't care. It doesn't matter what term you use. I mean, to me, the terms doesn't mean anything. It's just something that you notice. You know, it's like a commonality. Like, you see synchronicities, you see angel numbers, you have these premonitions, these visions, these dreams, these psychic abilities somehow. You know, all this stuff is the same, no matter what you call it. It's something that it feels like most people don't possess, is what I'm saying. Because, you know, and I'm gonna have a lady on named Michelle Gibson, and I heard her on another show talk about you know, she could see structures that aren't there to everybody else, which is interesting to me because, again, you know, she might be on a higher vibration to where she can see something that we can't. or a lower vibration, as far as I don't know. I mean, but I think it's something that she can see because she's at a different level than what we are. Or you can see certain things. You can see these USOs and UFOs and stuff, and because you're at a different level than I might be, right? So I think that's pretty interesting. Again, to another interesting thread to pull at, because it's almost as if, like, I don't think that when there's a schizophrenic man, there was a guy in my hometown that used to walk around with a wheelbarrow, and he always wore an army helmet, and he would always talk about things coming from the sky. And like, I don't think that man's crazy. I think that man's like,
right,
can see something that we can't see, you know? And so I think he might be at a different vibration than we are. He's at a different channel than we are on the radio station, on the radio dial, you know? We're at 88.8, you know, he's at, 107.5, that kind of stuff. So
yeah, we try as humans, we try to quantify and explain away a lot of stuff and undermine things when we really have no right commenting on it whatsoever. We should just understand that everybody's having a unique experience, and that everybody's as unique as their own thumbprint, and that their frequency is their own. The entities that communicate with them are their own, and they're going to get wherever they're going. We should just leave them alone. That's what I think. And I mean, it's interesting. I wanted to touch on something that you said earlier. It's again falling in line with what I say about guarding your consciousness and protecting your temple. Diet is important, and all of that in determining how well you perceive these energies, right? And how well you can hold these frequencies in your body. It's very difficult. I've tested it. Anytime I'm with the kids and we're on vacation and we're just eating junk. Like, when I say eating junk, I mean we bake our own cakes and stuff. We make our own pizzas and stuff like that. Whenever we're eating that's crap, though, me and my girl, we feel it. We feel it because we're different. Like, we've both had it. Not that I want to tell her experiences, she'll get mad at me, but we've both had experiences in years gone by where we were meditating. This is when I lived in the United States, and black vans would pull up outside my house, or black helicopters pull up in the sky. You're trying to figure out what the fuck is this guy doing, right? Like, this guy's giving off some energy. What is that? We forget that we're all just blips on a radar somewhere. And it's hard to do those things when you're putting things in your body that make you denser,
Yeah, we consume so much and we just let these demons in, right? It's we consent to all of this stuff. And when you consent, you are letting these demons in. You are letting the food demons in. You're letting the porn demons in. You saw me last time I was drinking Red Bull. I let the Red Bull demons in, right? It's like, I'm consuming all this stuff and you're consuming all this stuff because we consent to it. We consent to the movies we were watching. And what they do, man, is they put this sigil magic in movies, these subliminal messages and these different types of things that affect your subconscious. And, we just agree to it. And so when you see them on the talking, when people say stuff like, oh, it's predictive programming, and it's like, no, it's magic. They're performing magic on you. They want to manifest something into reality because our thoughts are vibrations, and everything we think can be vibrated into a reality. Everything can. And so they want us, they put these images in our head so we will have it in our subconscious so we can build that reality for them, because the devil can't create.
Exactly.
He can only. So, that we're putting off this vibration that's creating the world around us. That's the biggest thing that I've realized in my life, is like, everything is like an egregore almost. You have to kind of, Mother's Day is an egregore, right? It's like everything is an egregore that is spawned from our collective consciousness in some way. And they know that they can do that. They can affect us by putting out things, broadcasting from the 33rd parallel, right? Or, putting out whatever messages they want, because again, they're not predictive programming. They're manifesting. They're wanting these things to come into reality. They want the end of the world to come. So every movie, Google it right now, dude. Do a Google search if you want. And for anybody listening, Google 2025 and you'll see this like crazy images, end of the world stuff. In Google 2026, 2027, 2028, you'll see end of the world stuff.
It just gets worse.
Huh?
Yeah, it gets worse and worse. It just gets worse and worse. Like, especially if you look out for like the movie titles and stuff and the IMDb things and look at some of the things that are coming out. That's the only way I know what's going on out there. Because,
I happen to know for a fact that they get together in what's that place called over at the Bilderberg Group? They get together once a year to talk about world policy and how they can do these kind of things, right? What they're going to do. They plan everything out over there. And then they get together once a year at Sun Valley, Idaho conference. And then this is where all the media meets. This is where where Facebook bought Instagram, where all the major deals go down. This is where they have big people come in. They have big celebrities, big sports stars come in and they talk about their agenda. This is a real thing. This is a real place where all the biggest celebrities and media moguls go, because they take the message from Bilderberg Group and then they put it into movies. And that's a real thing that's happening. And people have to understand that everything you consume, you have to guard your consciousness. You got to be careful what you're letting in. Don't just watch a movie with like, oh, this is wonderful. And, because there are people, for example, there's women who sit there and watch the murder mysteries on Netflix. They love the real
Lifetime
whatever
movies.
it's called. Yeah, dude, they just love it. And that's just putting these images in their minds, man, that, and they're doing it to our kids. Our kids they have a warped sense of reality because of all this stuff. It's a real thing. I got kids, man. I know it's a real thing that's going on. And as the veil starts thinning, more and more people are seeing it, but it's something that it almost seems like it can't be stopped unless you just literally turn it off. You turn off all of everything that we're even stuff like this, man. Even our shows, it's almost like, don't just go out and experience life. Don't just soak in information from everybody else. What is it like? What are your neighbors like to you? Are they nice to you? Good. Do you love each other? Good. That's fine. Who cares? I don't care about any of that stuff. All that matters is your personal experience in life. Because like you said, we all have these very different experiences because we signed up for these different things in the unseen realm that we were in before, whatever that's called, like heaven, whatever.
Right.
Whatever
it's like when I was telling you, it's like when I was telling you that I'm so far past everything now because I've been on the path for a long time that I no longer believe in the spiritual being having a human experience thing. I believe in being a human and being, screwy and learning things, because that's how you learn. You apply things that you learn or you don't. You can either learn the lesson or you don't. And you don't get anywhere unless you do things in this realm. So when you take in garbage, you put garbage in your mind, you get garbage out, and our memories are basically things that they want us to remember as our own when we watch television or we scroll on social media. And that's why there's so many people that are coming out from the mainstream outlets that are saying things similar to what we say. And that's why there's new age gurus and science gurus and all that kinds of stuff. It's to steer us right back around in the other direction. It's, if you look up BF Skinner, we live inside of a Skinner box. That's what it is. So we're under, behavioral modification all the time.
Where Hue, HUE -man, we're colors. We are the colors of the visible spectrum. That's what I was just telling you about. We're the light beings. We are the colors of light that are being projected from God's light, right? It's like, but yeah, man, they put us into these boxes beginning. It's all about energy. They're energy vampires. They feast off of our energy. They have to, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to survive. They wouldn't be able to do anything. They wouldn't be able to experience the world that we experience. So they keep us in a state of fear and low vibrations for a reason. So guard your consciousness in that regard. You really do. You have to protect it. You have to, don't consent to everything. Like I know there was a big event that happened recently, right, in the United States, and friends of mine like, what do you think? What do you think's really happening? And I'm like, I don't care either way. I know that sounds like how can you not care? And I'm just like, I just don't care, because once you get to a point of like, you start to understand that everything is designed to manipulate your energy. Everything is designed to lower your vibrations. It's like, why would I waste my energy on that? There's nothing I can change, nothing I can do about it. I could just, oh, okay, that happened. Okay. Like, I can't do anything about it. It's not an experience that's happening to me at this moment. You know, I understand that it affects people in some other way, but I have no thought or care about it. When people start talking about college football here in, you know, South Carolina, hey man, do you root for the Gamecocks or the Clemson Tigers? And I go, I don't care either way. I used to love football. I used to love college football, but I don't pay any attention to it. And my only vice that I have is baseball. I like baseball, so I watch pro baseball. But that's the only thing I've allowed myself to consume. And media like ours, like I like listening to people like you, and you know, there are other different shows just to get a different perspective on things, because I hear you say stuff all the time. I'm like, yes, that just take it even deeper, because that's where I'm trying to go. When you start saying things like, I hate the word, would you say you didn't like to use the word, what was it a while ago? God,
like wake up and stuff like that. Things like that.
Yeah, wake up. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. Like, yeah,
that's all that stuff is word magic, you know? Yeah,
it is word magic.
Have you ever read the book Word Magic?
I bought it because of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so because of you, dude.
Yeah. So it's kind of.
I haven't read it. Matter of fact, I think I got it.
It's kind of weird. Like useful tools like that, like Word Magic or Black's Law Library and things like that. You know.
Yes, for sure, dude. That Black's Law stuff is crazy, man. I got the book right here for people as proof. I don't want to. It's right here in my backpack because I'm in the mountains in North Carolina right now traveling, so I wanted to bring something to have to read on the road. But yeah, man, that's what it's. Word magic. It's all word magic, designed to send you down a different path. Because we've all consented to this. Like, I'm an American. Are you an American citizen?
No.
So I'm an American citizen. I didn't sign up to be an American citizen. I was born into that, and I just accept it. I've consented with my birth certificate. I've consented to that information. I've consented to a corporation owning me, another corporation, right? It's like, but I didn't really do that. So how do I untangle myself from that consent? And man, that's because that's what it's all about. It's like, I heard somebody say one time that the devil is very legal. And I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He knows the law better than anybody. He knows the language better than anybody. And he's a very, like, it's a soul contract that you sign with when you consent to things. So anyways, guard your consciousness is very important, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here because the timestamp was like 1:13:33 when you stopped talking, which is weird. So that's a sign. Where can we find you, Brad?
Yeah, I'm at theawakenedpodcast.com, and basically anywhere you get your podcast. Maybe I'm not on like Spreaker or anything like that. I don't know what the difference is, but I'm on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, all that stuff. And I'm going to try to, like, I need to make some money to kind of keep my podcast going, because I do have a bunch of softwares and things I got to pay for. So I might end up getting like a Patreon or something like that to kind of help offset the cost of some of that stuff, but it won't be a lot of, I won't be charging a ton of money or anything like that. I do like to give money back to different ways, whether that be just giving it to somebody like, homeless person, or giving it to my local church that I grew up in, or just, giving it to whoever needs it. So I don't just take the money lightly when somebody, signs up for me. I take it very seriously, because money is something that not every, it's a commodity that not everybody has. And that's another thing that's a magic thing that we've consented to, right? Is the money. But But yeah, man, I'm on all these different platforms. I'm on Instagram, the Awaken Podcast 33. I just signed up for TikTok, but honestly, I'm not really feeling it. I might end up deleting it. But if you want to, for now, you can find me at the Awaken Podcast over on TikTok, and I'm on Rumble. But I haven't uploaded all the clips, but I'm working on getting all these clips, because what I've learned is like editing video takes forever when you do podcasts. So I'm working on just getting clips from each show that I've done so far. And yeah, you can find me in all those places, man. I thank you so much for having me on, dude. I really appreciate it. I love talking to you, by the way. We could talk out for hours on or off the air. I don't care what it is. We could talk on Instagram chat if you want. I love talking to you, buddy. So.
Yeah, it's been good talking to you too. We'll have to do another show, or I'll call you sometime or something, and we'll talk. I'm interested to find out how the documentary is going, so I'll keep up with you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I forgot about that. I am trying to do a documentary as well, and it does cost money, but I don't have like a bunch of fancy equipment. Believe it or not, our phones are pretty good. They're pretty good cameras on our phones. You can shoot 60 frames per second. So I got a gimbal and I got my phone, and I'm going to record interviews in a different way. I'm pretty much going to be doing my whole documentary on my phone. It's going to be but it looks good so far. I've got some good clips so far. And like I said, traveling the 33rd parallel, I'm going to be getting a lot of stuff, making a bunch of stops, places like Rockwall, Texas, and Roswell, like I mentioned before, Sitgreaves National Forest, a bunch of places, man. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And hopefully in the next few months, you'll hear more from me about that. So yeah, man, thank you so much for having me on, dude. I really appreciate that.
All right, Brad. Well, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast. Once again, for the listeners, you can find us on Spreaker. Download the app if you can. It automatically updates you, and it will put all of the episodes that come out in offline mode so you can listen without being connected. I know a lot of you like to drive with your podcast and different things like that. That's probably the best way you can find us, but we're on Spotify, Apple, and I'm not really doing the YouTube thing so much anymore, so check us on Rumble as well. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious of the brain to get the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity Podcast.